Hello, I'm Russian behaviorist Vladimir Bekhterev. I'm a physiologist, psychologist, neurologist, and psychiatrist. In 1847, I graduated from the Military Medical Academy in St. Petersburg, Russia. By the age of 24, I traveled to Berlin to study with Du Bois and Wundt. In 1855, I established the first psychology lab in Russia. It was located at the University of Kazan. I was also a founding member of the Psychoneurological Institute. In 1851, I earned my doctoral degree in medicine by focusing on the physical connection between the physical state of man and his mental state. This led me to my study of reflexology. In my paper, Objective Psychology, I stated that all mental processes were accompanied by reflexes which could be observed and analyzed. Pavlov, I believe you coined this as the term conditioned reflexes. Anywho, I believe that we could study an organism's responses to external or internal stimuli through this method. Along with this, I also support research that states that certain functions could be traced back to specific regions of the brain. I chose to study motor reflexes because they are present in all living creatures. I believe all behavior can be explained by studying these observable traits. I like to investigate the effect the environment has on observable, overt behavior. I do agree with Pavlov and many others that psychology should be purely objective. I believe all behavior can be explained objectively by studying reflexes or observable traits. I do, however, disagree with Pavlov's experiment that led to his discovery. My experiment was well thought out and holds true today. While in my lab studying reflexes, I conducted an experiment not only on animals, but humans as well. I used slight shocks and discovered that participants eventually made an association to their source of pain. The shocks also resulted in a withdrawal reaction. In other words, they tended to avoid it. I criticize Pavlov's research concerning conditioned reflexes for the following reasons. 1. He did not attempt to generalize it to humans. I made sure my experiment was appropriate enough so that human subjects could also participate. Second, I feel strongly that collecting saliva as a means is incredibly unreliable. Yes, these animals salivated after the association. However, in a real life situation, this will not always be the case, especially if no hunger is present. Simply put, if those dogs weren't hungry, your experiment would have never worked. On the other hand, the reflex resulting from a mild shock will always occur, no matter what the circumstances. Behaviors like this are what we should study. Although Pavlov's and my theories are quite similar, Watson discovered Pavlov first, thus making him a household name. I met my death on December 24, 1927. There's a bit of controversy surrounding the cause. Some say it was a bit odd I died shortly after diagnosing Stalin with paranoia. Furthermore, he had my name and works erased from textbooks.
I'm Ivan Petrov Pavlov, and I was born in a small village in central Russia. My family hoped that I would one day become a priest, and I even went to theological seminary. However, after reading Charles Darwin, I found that I cared more for scientific pursuits rather than religious ones. So I left seminary and attended the University of St. Petersburg. There I studied chemistry and physiology, and I earned my doctorate in 1879. I continued my studies and began doing research in topics that I found most interesting, which was digestion and blood circulation. My work became well known, and I was appointed the professor of physiology at the Imperial Medical Academy. I am known for classical or Pavlovian conditioning, but what many do not know is that I actually discovered that by accident. It was while studying the digestion in dogs that I noticed an interesting occurrence, that my canine subjects would begin to salivate whenever an assistant entered the room. In my digestive research, my assistants and I would introduce a variety of edible and non-edible items and measure the saliva production that the items produced. Salivation, I noted, is a reflexive process. It occurs automatically in response to a specific stimulus that is not under conscious control. However, I noted that the dogs would often begin salivating in the absence of food and smell. I quickly realized that the salivary response was not due to an automatic physiological process. Based on my observations, I suggested that the salivation was a learned response. The dogs were responding to the sight of the research assistant's white lab coats, which the animals had come to associate with the presentation of food. Unlike the salivary response to the presentation of food, which is an unconditioned reflex, salivating to the expectation of food is a conditioned reflex. I then focus on investigating how these conditioned responses are learned or acquired. In a series of experiments, I set out to provoke a conditioned response to a previously neutral stimulus. I opted to use food as the unconditioned stimulus, or the stimulus that evokes a response naturally and automatically. The sound of a metronome was chosen to be the neutral stimulus. The dogs would first be exposed to the sound of the ticking metronome, and then the food would be immediately presented. After several conditioning trials, I noted that the dogs began to salivate when they heard the metronome. Thus, the previously neutral stimulus, which would be the metronome, had become what is known a conditioned stimulus that then provoked a conditioned response, which is the salivation. I also believe that there's an inhibition as well as excitation. When the metronome is rung many times with no food forthcoming, the dog will eventually stop salivating at the sound of the metronome. That is called extinction. But just give the canine a little food just once, and it is as if he had never had the behavior extinguished. He is right back to salivating at the sound of the metronome. This spontaneous recovery strongly suggests that the habit had been there all along and that the dog had simply learned to inhibit his response. I could therefore condition not only excitation but inhibition. I can teach a dog that he is not getting food just as easily as I can teach him that he is getting food. Moreover, I founded the first signal system during my research into physiological mechanisms of speech. In animals, reality is signaled mainly by stimuli that are perceived directly by sensory receptor cells and processed in the cerebral hemispheres. Other than written and heard words, this is all that internalized to inform impressions, sensations, and ideas from the surrounding natural and social environments. This is the first signal system of reality, and we have it in common with animals. In the course of a person's working and social life, the first signal system is supplemented by a new and specifically human system of verbal signs, which is called the second signal system. Words have formed the second signal system of reality, which is specific to us and serves as the signal for the first signals. Both human signals differ qualitatively from each other, but they interact closely and harmoniously. So while I am known for classical conditioning and psychology, I'm more interested in physiology. I looked upon the young science of psychiatry a little dubiously, but I did think that the conditioned reflexes could explain the behavior of psychotic people. For example, I suggested that those who withdrew from the world may associate all stimulus with possible injury or threat. What helped propel my fame was when behaviorist John Watson introduced my theory into his behaviors theory around 1913. I believe that is why Bekhterev is the most envious of me. My country, both as Russia and the Soviet Union, respected me immensely. In 1904, I won the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine for my research on digestion. I would describe myself as outspoken and often at odds with the Soviet government later in my life, but my world renown and my work that my nation was proud of kept me free from persecution. I worked actively in the lab until I died at the age of 87. Thank you.